retirement. And from Bill Reeves, who summers in Vermont and will be attending the First Universalist Parish in Derby Line, Vermont, returning in September. Safe trip, Bill. Yay. Lovely Kate and Reba now present our Time for All Ages. I invite children and young at heart to come forward and sit in front for a story.
Good morning. Do you want to look at the board, the pictures? Because they'll be up there too. All right, good morning. So today we are also celebrating Teacher Appreciation. And our teachers, I hadn't realized that this theme was power for this month, but they are much more powerful than they think they are, and little things make a difference. And our book today, well, shows that. It's called The Dot. Art class was over, but Vashti sat glued to her chair. Her paper was empty. Vashti's teacher leaned over the blank paper. "Ah, a polar bear in a snowstorm," she said. "Very funny," said Vashti. "I just can't draw." Her teacher smiled. "Just make a mark and see where it takes you." Vashti grabbed a marker and gave the paper a good, strong jab. "There." Her teacher picked up the paper and studied it carefully. She pushed the paper toward Vashti and quietly said, "Now, sign it." Vashti thought for a moment. "Well, maybe I can't draw, but I can sign my name." The next week, when Vashti walked into art class, she was surprised to see what was hanging above her teacher's desk. It was the little dot she had drawn, her dot, all framed in swirly gold. I can make a better dot than that." She opened her never-before-used set of watercolors and set to work. Vashti painted and painted. A red dot, a purple dot, a yellow dot, a blue dot. The blue mixed with the yellow. She discovered that she could make a green dot. Vashti kept experimenting, lots of little dots in many colors. "If I can make little dots, I can make big dots too." Vashti splashed her colors with a bigger brush on bigger paper to make bigger dots. Vashti even made a dot by not painting a dot. At the school art show a few weeks later, Vashti's many dots made quite a splash. Vashti noticed a little boy gazing up at her. "You're a really great artist. I wish I could draw," he said. "I bet you can," said Vashti. "Me? No, not me. I can't draw a straight line with a ruler." Vashti smiled. She handed the boy a blank sheet of paper. "Show me." The boy's pencil shook as he drew his line. Vashti stared at the boy's squiggle, and then she said, "Please sign it." So Vashti's teacher definitely inspired and helped her. And we want to recognize our teachers. Today we are giving them succulents, and it says, "Thank you for helping us grow." The Reese Committee and the Children and Youth of Tapestry, and they helped decorate the cards, and they're outside on the Reese table, so please, we have teachers that help once in a while, and we have teachers that help a couple times a month, and we have assistants, the same thing, once in a while. All of them are integral to our program. So if you only can help out every couple of months, please sign up and be an assistant and help out every couple of months, because you're all very important. So if you think you deserve a plant, you deserve it. Pick it up. All right, even if you only helped out once, there's plenty for everybody. So those of you who have helped in the class, if you could please stand so we can give you a round of applause. Thank you so much. One of our classes, there's a couple more things. One of our classes is run by a teen, Miranda Lowe. If you could please stand, we have a gift for you. She was in charge of leading our youth group, the Faith and Flapjacks class. It meets the last Sunday of every month, and they'll be with her this month, but then on their own, Jay Koyseth and Noah Gothard will be co-leading that class this coming year. So yay! We're very happy about that. So thank you, Miranda, for everything that you have done. Let's see, just a real quick sort of, over the summer we're doing Gather the Spirit, which is a UUA curriculum about water conservation. I'll be teaching all the Sundays that I'm here, which means I really only need assistants. So new helpers, old helpers, please sign up. They're where the succulents are over there. There's a sign-up sheet. And then in the fall, we're doing world religions in all the classes. So if you're interested in water or in world religions, please sign up to assist or to lead the classes. You are very appreciated, and I really thank all of our teachers very much. So now those wonderful teachers who did sign up for today, please join us in going to our classes. Thank you.
Immediately after the service, I apologize for not saying this earlier, Jan Meslin will share what's happening at next week's UUA General Assembly. You can stay right in the area after the service if you're interested. For our reading today, we have a short reading, but it comes from Dave, and it's from Marshall McLuhan, who, as you may remember, wrote the book, The Medium is the Mass Age. We shape our tools, and afterwards our tools shape us. Marshall McLuhan. Lovely. We will now observe a moment of silence. Pleasure to introduce Dave Salahi.
Ever since Prometheus gave humans the gift of fire, here's John Henry. Okay, next slide, please. Great. Ever since Prometheus gave humans the gift of fire, there have been stories of how our own technology has threatened us, and boy, does it. In Stanley Kubrick's classic film, 2001: A Space Odyssey, a computer named HAL decides that it knows better than the astronauts, so it kills them all in order to best fulfill its mission. We're not yet fighting with our robots, but the day may come when we are engaged in a struggle for power with our machines. For now, though, we use our machines to more effectively wage war against our fellow humans. Technology has long shaped the way we wage war, and that continues today. In centuries past, kings and tribal leaders used to lead their troops into battle. Now our tribal leaders ensconce themselves in air-conditioned offices and bunkers to avoid any threat of personal injury. Waging war has even become a desk job for some. Drone pilots commute daily to their jobs from homes in Nevada. While at the office, they engage in missions around the world. I wonder, how does being removed from the visceral act of killing affect the way in which we prosecute our battles? And how does it affect our warriors? Of course, much of our fighting is still done in person, and soldiers still get killed. But those who don't die on the battlefield are increasingly surviving because of advances in medical technology. The Dika arm is one example of a technology which is enabling more of our wounded warriors not just to survive, but potentially even to thrive. And neural bypass technology is enabling Ian Burkhart, a quadriplegic, to control his paralyzed hand with his thoughts. Meanwhile, we ordinary folks are getting medical diagnoses and prescription recommendations from computers. Maybe not directly, but through our physicians for now. 2 years ago, MIT's Andrew McAfee said of IBM's Watson supercomputer, "I'm convinced if it's not already the world's best diagnostician, it will be soon." One way in which our technologies are shaping us can literally be seen in the increasing prevalence of obesity. The Centers for Disease Control say that more than 1/3 of US adults are obese. Our technology has enabled us to feast daily on processed, high-calorie foods and drinks. In a recent Intelligence Squared debate, Dr. Tony Young said, "Within the next few years, more people will die of obesity-related causes than of cancer. In an attempt to counter the ills of our sedentary lifestyle, some customers are being offered discounts on their health insurance based on how active they are. Some plans require a sophisticated activity tracker, a device like a Fitbit, which monitors not only the duration but also the vigor and intensity of exercise. The tracker even learns the user's walking gait to prevent fraud. This constant tracking raises questions of privacy. What personal information exactly is being captured? And who is seeing it? Does my employer have access? A lot of us worry these days about the personal information that's being collected by our smartphones, by social media companies like Facebook, and by online retailers who track our progress on the web, our visits to web pages on the web. There is real cause for concern, but I think we also have to step back a bit to gain a broader perspective. Our notions on privacy are based on relatively recent experience. In prehistoric times, people had very little in the way of privacy as we now know it. Your typical hunter-gatherer clan comprised a group of about 100 people. You were together all day long. You lived in a hut with your family. There were no private bedrooms and no private bathrooms. Everybody knew your business and you knew theirs. It's our modern technology which has provided us with private homes and apartments that has allowed our current understanding of privacy to arise. Our homes shape our understanding of family and of community. And now that we no longer know everyone in our clan and our neighboring clans, we need new ways of finding mates. And paradoxically, although we potentially have access to thousands of people, we may find that it's hard to meet them, or at least the right ones. So one of the ways we meet Mr. Right nowadays is through online dating. And one of the ways that works is that prospective dates sometimes text each other before meeting in person. Makes sense, it's a low-risk way to get acquainted. However, I've heard of some prospective couples who will carry on a budding relationship solely through text messages for days and even weeks. It's hard to see how a person could imagine that a text conversation could substitute for the interpersonal chemistry that's essential in a romantic relationship. Of course, in the past, there have been people who pursued courtships with pen and paper. And of course, that was just another technology which shaped our behavior in a different way. Back in the present, we find that there are Facebook romances and Facebook affairs. I'm told there's even a website for people who are looking for other people to have affairs with. Now, being happily married, I have no personal experience with any of this. Today, more than ever before, our digital devices have become intermediaries between us. We text, we email, we post Facebook status updates, we share photos on Instagram, and we tweet. We're more connected than ever before. Sometimes these online connections hold out the promise of change in the real physical world. This is Wael Ghonim, the Egyptian man whose anonymous Facebook page helped to launch the Tahrir Square revolution in early 2011 that toppled President Hosni Mubarak. Ghonim once said, "If you want to liberate a society, all you need is the internet." But the revolution ultimately failed to give birth to a true democratic alternative. The movement was a failure, Ghonim says, because we failed to build consensus, and the political struggle led to intense polarization. Social media only amplified the polarization by facilitating the spread of misinformation, rumors, echo chambers, and hate speech. Writer An Shao Min of the Civic Beat says, "It's becoming difficult to accept the optimistic rhetoric that holds that bringing people together online can automatically foster understanding. So in some cases we're seemingly more connected, but we're really less connected in the ways that matter." Meanwhile, we're becoming more and more attached to our devices. You've probably heard of Uber. It's a smartphone app which is turning the taxi business on its head. Uber is also the name of the privately held company which makes the app. The company is valued at something like $60 billion. The question I'd like to examine is how that vast wealth is distributed. One way of looking at it would be to ask, what is the average wealth of the employees? From a little online research, I was able to find out that Uber has something like 3,000 employees. But the question of employee count is a tricky one because it depends on whether you count their drivers as employees or independent contractors. Uber calls them independent contractors, which means, of course, they don't get stock options. So if we go with the 3,000 employee figure, the calculation of average employee wealth is something like $16 million per employee. Of course, not all the employees get stock options, and the division isn't equal. So much of the money is concentrated in the upper echelon. Some of the early employees are estimated to be billionaires. So what you have is a vast amount of wealth concentrated in the hands of relatively few people. Meanwhile, the drivers struggle to make ends meet, and taxi drivers are increasingly finding themselves unemployed. Now, Uber is a controversial case, and you can make an argument on either side of the various questions surrounding the company. But the point I want to make is that this concentration of wealth at the top is representative of a trend that's been underway for some time now. And the trend is particularly common in high-tech companies, where startups can take off in just a few years and achieve multi-billion-dollar valuations. According to an article this April in the LA Times, the U.S. has one of the widest pay gaps between executives and average workers. This concentration of wealth harkens back to the days of the robber barons. In the Gilded Age, it fell to Teddy Roosevelt and his square deal to tilt the balance away from the railroads and toward labor. But so far in the 21st century, the pendulum has been swinging largely in the other direction. Software has changed us from people who schedule each other into people who are scheduled by software. We are a resource to be summoned on demand. Contingent scheduling requires employees to be on call and without a predictable schedule. It requires employees to work the closing shift one night and the opening shift the next morning. Your manager doesn't know or care that you have a young child or an aging mother at home because your manager is a computer. According to Mark Andreessen, the co-creator of the Netscape web browser, in the future there will be two kinds of jobs: those that involve telling computers what to do, and those that involve being told what to do by computers. Today, many people are experiencing job loss or underemployment, and like the John Henrys of the 19th century, many are in this situation because of technological change. In the same way that jobs for phone receptionists and bank tellers have been largely automated, today jobs which are highly skilled are now being done more and more by machines. I previously mentioned medical diagnostics and prescriptions for medications. Similarly, much of the work of flying a plane nowadays is done by the autopilot. Today, pilots are becoming less skilled at flying because they spend less time actually flying the plane. Last year, an article in the Wall Street Journal said, computers do legal research, write stock reports and news stories, as well as translate conversations. At car dealers, they generate online advertising. And at banks, they churn out government-required documents to prevent money laundering. All jobs done by human workers a few years ago. Self-driving cars are coming. What then will happen to the Uber drivers and the truckers? And by the way, truck driving is the largest single occupation in the U.S. Historically, the pace of technological change was slow. At the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, new and innovative machines appeared relatively infrequently. But as technology has developed, the pace of innovation has grown faster and faster. Now, software tools provide leverage that allows us to more quickly develop new software features and new software tools. These new tools, in turn, help us to develop the next generation of tools even more efficiently. This positive feedback loop results in increasingly faster new product development and ever greater reliance on the tools. This trend will only accelerate in the future as software becomes even smarter and eventually approaches the level of true artificial intelligence. Almost no one is exempt from this trend, although many do in fact doubt it. If you think your job can't be automated, consider this. A report by the Pew Research Center on the public's views about the future of workforce automation found that 65% expect that 50 years from now, robots and computers will do much of the work that's currently done by humans. But when it comes to our own positions, they're not so worried. A much larger share, 80%, expect their occupations to exist 5 decades from now. Aaron Smith, Pew's Associate Director of Research, said, "There's a real disconnect between what people think will happen in the abstract and the extent to which they think it will impact them." This much is true. Work is increasingly being automated, and jobs are increasingly being lost. That trend will not change anytime soon. In a capitalist system, anytime a function can be done more cheaply by a robot, that function will be done by a robot, and any company that fails to maximize efficiency will soon be swept aside. Now, some people say there will always be a place for human creativity and ingenuity. Some doubt whether machines can really innovate in the way that people can. That's an open question. It's certainly tempting to want to believe that there is something unique and special about the human spirit that cannot be replicated by machines, and that may well be true. Meanwhile, practical and pressing questions confront us. In 2013, Oxford University researchers forecast that machines might be able to perform half of all US jobs in the next 2 decades. So if 50% of jobs are automated, where does that leave us? In 1977 in Youngstown, Ohio, the steel industry shut down. A recent piece in The Atlantic examined what has happened over the decades since then. One of the lessons to emerge from studies of places like Youngstown is that unemployment is not just an economic problem. Author Adam Devey quotes John Russo, a professor of labor studies at Youngstown State University, who said, "When jobs go away, the cultural cohesion of a place is destroyed. The cultural breakdown matters even more than the economic breakdown." We all need to find meaning, whether it's through our work, by raising a family, or being part of a community like Tapestry. We need to create. We need to build. We need to matter to others. But how do we do that without work? How do we sustain our physical selves without employment? One idea which is increasingly being discussed is the universal basic income. A universal basic income is defined as an income paid by the state to each member of a society, regardless of whether he or she wishes to engage in paid employment or is rich or poor, independently of any other sources of income, and irrespective of cohabitation arrangements in the domestic sphere. Now, many people worry that a bunch of freeloaders would use the opportunity of a guaranteed income to sit around all day, smoke pot, and play video games. Undoubtedly, some people would choose to do just that. But we all need to find meaning. We need to create. We need to connect with others. There's a lively debate around the idea of universal basic income, but here's something to think about. If we're freed from the necessity of working for a living, think about what kinds of more fulfilling work people might choose to do. Maybe people would find more time to volunteer here at Tapestry. So far in discussing all these technological innovations and the ways in which they've shaped us, I've been talking about cultural changes. But there's another way in which we're being shaped by our technology, genetic changes. For millions of years, natural selection has shaped us and our ancestors. Those who ran too slowly or those having a susceptibility to disease died and their genes faded from the gene pool. Then we created culture, and that began shaping our genes too. Now it's not necessary to be able to avoid a saber-toothed tiger in order to survive. Today, other factors affect our reproductive success, like maybe good looks, or popularity, or our religious beliefs. But even more dramatically, we're now beginning to alter our own genes and those of our children. We're able to detect certain birth defects during prenatal exams, and we now have a choice of whether to bring those pregnancies to term. The future also holds the prospect of being able to cure some congenital conditions through the use of genetic engineering. If you could prevent your child from being born with a crippling disease, wouldn't you want to do that? But what about unintended side effects? In an opinion piece in Nature, a group of biotech scientists warned, genome editing in human embryos using current technologies could have unpredictable effects on future generations. This makes it dangerous and ethically unacceptable. In this type of scenario, it's not just the unborn child whose genes would be altered, it's also all the future progeny of that child. So the consequences are somewhat unknown and potentially far-reaching. And if you combine genetic engineering with the types of prostheses and neural implants that we're starting to see, it's hard to know where we'll end up. So we shape technology, and technology shapes us. So far, we've had the ability to choose the ways in which we shape technology, and by extension, the way in which it shapes us. But we haven't always chosen wisely. Addiction to texting, computer games, and social media are examples of choices that can carry a downside. Next, as technology becomes more and more autonomous, we will face increasing challenges in keeping it contained. And even when we are the ones making the decisions, there are some momentous decisions to be made. We must face these choices squarely, thoughtfully, and deliberately. Once the genie is released, it won't go back in the bottle. Thank you.
That was great.